Situation in Maryland today. Here's a live look at what's left of the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore. A cargo ship lost power overnight and ran into it, causing it to collapse.
Yeah, by now you've probably actually seen that video on your social media feeds of that ship hitting the bridge. It is just stunning to see. Nearly 12 million vehicles cross the Key Bridge every year. This is an enormous span here that affects a lot of people. It is the outermost of 3 toll crossings of Baltimore's harbor there. Now, from the map there, you could see that for ships, it's the only way into the port of Baltimore. You go right underneath that. It's also home to cruise ships from both Carnival and Royal Caribbean, so a very busy port there.
Right now, crews are working against time and frigid temperatures to search for the people who are still unaccounted for. Several vehicles and construction workers were on the bridge when this all happened, and they were sent plunging into that water.
Absolute tragedy. The mayor of Baltimore has issued a local state of emergency because of this, and we did hear from President Biden in the last several hours as well, who says he is committed to funding a rebuild of that bridge, of course, with the needed approval from Congress.
Our Brittany Moncrief is joining us from the newsroom now. And Brittany, you've been following this story all day, listening to officials, even getting some expert insight. Brittany, what have you learned?
Well, ship traffic has been shut off while crews work to find those people who are still missing after this collapse. And 2 people have already been rescued, 1 in critical condition. Now, earlier today, President Joe Biden calling on Congress support to get as much federal resources to Baltimore as possible to begin rebuilding. Now, about 30,000 vehicles cross the Francis Scott Key Bridge daily, and it's one of the largest shipping ports in the country. That's why Biden says he does not want to wait on the process of determining who's at fault for a bridge that supports roughly 15,000 jobs. Now, according to Maryland Governor Wes Moore, the ship crew lost power and issued a mayday call before the crash. Now, that allowed authorities to limit vehicle traffic. Now, Governor Moore says the ship was going about 9 miles per hour, which may not seem fast, but Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University's Dr. Jeff Brown, who's also worked on bridge structures like these, tell us it can still have a heavy impact because of the ship's size and weight. And he also says the piers that the ship hit supports the structure, and they are about 1,200 feet apart to allow big vessels to pass. So he says it's not uncommon for the bridge to fall the way that it did.
You have a very large distance between the piers, but then unfortunately, if something does happen to one of those piers, then that's really what's supporting the entire bridge.
And Brown also tells us that typically your average bridge, like a highway bridge, would have piers that are about 100 feet apart. Now, the Francis Scott Key Bridge was built in 1977, and Dr. Brown says that's before a lot of major standards for vessel collisions were put in place. Now, I know many may not know the Baltimore area very well here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, but our station joins us to give us a better understanding of how an incident of this magnitude can impact traffic.
Thanks, Brittany. Like you mentioned, around 30,000 vehicles a day across Key Bridge. And yeah, that's going to have a huge impact on traffic. Doing some research today, though, it does look like you have a couple viable alternate routes there in Baltimore for traffic. That's the good news. Just to kind of put it into perspective, what we're looking at here, that stretch of bridge that crosses Lake Louisville, that's about a mile, just over a mile and a half long, very close to the same amount of distance. It's got almost 4 times the amount of vehicles crossing it per day. That's why you have these massive backups anytime something goes wrong on these bridges that basically cross over this major interstate and body of water. Taking another look along Lake Ray Hubbard, that's the I-30 bridge. You know that area coming in from Rockwall County, extremely busy, and you have about 140,000 vehicles crossing over that. Let me go ahead and see if that wants to pop up camera-wise. There it is. And that also includes a portion of land, about 4.5 miles, Dal Rock, in between the 2 bodies of water. So that is that is definitely going to be a number that continues to grow. Experts expect that to reach over 200,000 by the year 2040 as far as the number of vehicles crossing Lake Ray Hubbard. Jason?
Wow, some good perspective there, Stacia. Thank you for that. We know that this collapse is going to have a huge impact to the surrounding communities there in Baltimore, but between the cargo on board and cruise liners in the area there and the rebuild and how long that might take, we are taking a look now at the potential broad economic impact impact this could have. Here in North Texas, we have major maritime ports, or here in Texas, rather, we have major maritime ports in Houston, Corpus Christi, Beaumont, and Port Arthur, which could see more cargo coming in while that rebuild is happening in Maryland. So this will affect things all up and down the country here. Joining us to talk more about the impact that this could have is Professor of Civil Engineering at the University of Texas at Arlington, Dr. Noor Yazdani. Thanks for being here with us this afternoon.
Thanks for having me. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. So I want to pick your brain a little bit here because, you know, you're familiar with the engineering on these sorts of things. How huge of a project is this going to be to rebuild this span, and how long could that take?
Well, that's astronomical work. You know, it's 1.2 miles long, and just the sheer size of it. And it's very difficult to make a foundation of the bridge in a waterway, especially a Bay Area. So it may happen, but my estimate is probably at least a few months, 3 to 4 months. Now they can put a temporary bridge between the permanent bridge and now to make traffic pass over the waterway, but that's a temporary solution.
Mm-hmm. I think it's amazing even hearing that timeline when we see the kind of damage out there. But of course, you know this kind of stuff better than the rest of us do. It just seems like a huge undertaking. That's even if you had the money ready to go and had the approval ready to do it tomorrow. Can you talk a little bit about, this bridge has obviously been up for a little while. We heard that the standards have been updated some since it was built. Obviously, might they be looking at some pretty different build patterns as they put a new one in place?
Yes, the new standards went into play after the Sunshine Skyway Bridge in Florida collapsed. I think it's in the 80s. A similar situation, in a storm, a barge hit the bridge and it collapsed. Since then, the federal standards have been tightened, and now we have new guidelines for vehicle impact or traffic impact, but that's for new bridges. So older bridges like this one has no protection. And I'm very surprised to see that around the pier, there was simply no passive protection like islands or something, which would allow the barge to be deflected from the support of the bridge. That's very unfortunate.
This thing just collapsed right away. One last question for you here. The Port of Baltimore here, I'm reading from the Wall Street Journal here. It's the 9th largest port by trade volumes, moves around 50 tons of trade as of last year. We have huge ports here in Texas. Obviously, though, some of that trade is going to have to be rerouted while engineers are getting in there and trying to put a new bridge in place there in Baltimore, aren't they?
Definitely. It's a huge challenge. It's not only the goods, it's the community around it. Especially vulnerable communities like poor communities, if they're affected by that, that's a huge challenge, because they're already economically challenged. So the issue is that how to route it properly and make the good flow. Are there any detours available nearby? I don't know, probably not to the port, right, itself. So there will be economic impact, huge economic impact. We have to absorb it. And looking forward, hopefully we will take similar bridges and then retrofit them, so that this kind of unfortunate situation doesn't happen again.
Yeah, you can bet that they're going to be looking at other bridges now that have similar designs. Dr. Noor Yazdani with the University of Texas in Arlington, thanks so much for your expertise this afternoon. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.
This, of course, is a developing story. Updates are expected to continue through the day. We're going to bring you the latest online and on our social media channels, as always. And, of course, please stay with us here for WFAA News at 5 and 6 o'clock.